Nobody cares what you think, Maya. You're a nobody. Those words hung in the air between me and my brother like poison. We were standing in the courthouse lobby. I was 28 years old, wearing a suit I'd bought from a thrift store and altered myself. My brother Derek was in a custom-tailored Tom Ford, his Rolex catching the fluorescent lights as he crossed his arms. "Derek, I'm just saying that maybe you should reconsider." "Reconsider?" He laughed. Actually laughed. "You work at a nonprofit making, what, 35 grand a year? You live in a studio apartment. You drive a car from 2009. And you're going to give me advice about my life?" I felt my face flush. Around us, people in expensive suits walked past, briefcases in hand, completely indifferent to my humiliation. "I'm your sister," I said quietly. "You're embarrassing," he shot back. "Mom and Dad are inside that courtroom right now, watching me finalize the biggest deal of my life, a $40 million acquisition. And you show up here acting like you have any idea what success looks like. I should tell you how we got here. But first, you need to understand something about my brother. Derek wasn't always like this. We grew up in a small town in Ohio. Our dad worked at a steel plant. Our mom was a school secretary. We weren't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. Derek was 3 years older than me. When we were kids, he used to let me tag along everywhere. To the basketball court, to his friends' houses. He even took me to his high school dances when I was in middle school, just so I wouldn't feel left out. "You and me, Maya," he used to say. "We're getting out of this town together." He wasn't wrong about that part. Derek got a full scholarship to Northwestern, business school. He graduated top of his class, got recruited by a consulting firm in Chicago, and within 5 years, he'd started his own private equity company. I took a different path. I went to state school, majored in social work, graduated with honors, but also with $60,000 in debt. While Derek was closing deals and flying first class to Singapore, I was working at a youth advocacy center in Cleveland, helping kids who'd aged out of foster care find housing and job training. The work mattered to me. It still does. But somewhere along the way, Derek started looking at me differently. It started small, comments at family dinners. "Still saving the world on food stamps, Maya." Jokes about my car. Jokes about my apartment. Jokes about the fact that I was single while he was dating models and entrepreneurs. Our parents would tell him to knock it off. But they also beamed with pride every time Derek's company got mentioned in Forbes or Business Insider. I tried not to let it bother me, but it did. The call came on a Tuesday night. I was making dinner, pasta with jarred sauce, nothing fancy, when my phone rang. Derek. He never called anymore. We mostly communicated through the family group chat, and even then, it was just him sending photos from Aspen or the Hamptons. "Hey," I answered, surprised. "Maya, I need you to do something for me." No hello, no small talk, just straight to business. "Okay." "I'm closing a deal in 2 weeks, acquiring a manufacturing company. It's a huge opportunity, but there's some complications with the legal side. I need you to come to the courthouse, support the family, show up." I stirred my pasta, confused. "Why would you need me there?" "Because it looks better," he said impatiently. "The judge is big on family values or whatever. I need Mom, Dad, and you there, looking supportive, looking like we're a tight-knit family unit." "Derek, I have work." "You can take a day off from handing out bus passes, Maya. This is important." I bit my tongue. "What kind of complications?" He hesitated. "There's been some concerns raised about labor practices at the company I'm acquiring, treatment of workers, wage theft allegations. Nothing that'll stick, but optics matter." My stomach turned. "Wage theft?" "It's overblown," he said quickly. "Disgruntled employees looking for a payout. My lawyers have it handled. I just need you there. 2 weeks, Tuesday morning. I'll text you the details." "Derek, I have to go. Meeting in 5. See you there." He hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, pasta boiling over. I couldn't let it go. That night, I pulled up everything I could find about Derek's acquisition. The company was called Midland Manufacturing, based in Michigan. They made automotive parts, employed about 400 people. And buried in local news articles, I found what Derek had glossed over. 3 months ago, 72 employees had filed a class action lawsuit against Midland. They claimed the company had been systematically underpaying them, denying overtime, and misclassifying workers to avoid benefits. The workers were mostly immigrants, Somali refugees, people who didn't speak English as a first language, people who were afraid to speak up because they needed the jobs. My hands were shaking as I read testimony after testimony. A single mother who'd worked 50-hour weeks but never saw overtime pay. A man who'd injured his back on the factory floor and was fired 3 days later before his benefits could kick in. A woman who'd been told she was an independent contractor even though she worked the same shift, same job, for 3 years straight. This wasn't just bad business. This was exploitation. And Derek wanted to buy the company, absorb it, make it part of his empire. I called him the next day. Derek, I looked into Midland Manufacturing. Jesus, Maya, why? Because you asked me to show up to court. I wanted to understand what I'd be supporting. You're supporting your brother. I'm not supporting wage theft. Silence. Then, you don't know what you're talking about. I read the court filing, Derek. 72 people. People who are lying to get money they didn't earn. Welcome to business, Maya. This happens all the time. Employees get mad when they're held accountable. They lawyer up, they make noise, but it doesn't make it true. What if it is true? It's not. But what if it is? His voice went cold. Then it's not my problem. I'm buying assets and infrastructure. What happened before I took over isn't my responsibility. Derek, are you coming or not? I closed my eyes. I don't think I can. Of course you can't. His laugh was bitter. Of course, the saint of Cleveland can't sully herself by standing next to her successful brother. You know what, Maya? Don't bother. You're right, nobody there will care if you show up or not. Because you're nobody. You've always been nobody. He hung up. I sat there for a long time. And then I made a decision. I reached out to the legal aid organization representing the Midland workers. It took 3 calls before I got through to the right person. An attorney named Grace Okoye. I'm calling about the Midland Manufacturing case, I said. My brother is trying to acquire the company, and I think I might have information that could help. We met at a coffee shop 2 days later. Grace was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, with a stack of file folders that took up half the table. Your brother is Derek Chen? She asked. Yes. And you work in social services? Youth advocacy, foster care transitions. She studied me. Why are you here? I told her everything, the phone call, the research, Derek's dismissal of the allegations. Grace listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back. What do you think you have that could help us? I don't know yet, I admitted. But I know my brother, and I know when he's cutting corners. This case isn't about your brother personally, Grace said carefully. It's about Midland, about getting these workers what they're owed. I understand. Do you? She tapped the folders. Because if you're looking for some dramatic courtroom moment where you get to confront your brother, that's not what this is. This is about 72 people who were stolen from. People with families. People who trusted a company to treat them fairly. I know, I said. And that's why I'm here. Grace considered. Then she slid a folder across the table. Derek's acquisition paperwork. His lawyers filed it with the court last week. Take a look at Section 12, Employment Transition Clause. I opened the folder, found Section 12, and my blood ran cold. The clause stated that upon acquisition, all pending employee litigation would be resolved through mandatory arbitration, waiving the right to class action proceedings. In plain English, Derek was trying to kill the lawsuit. He was going to buy the company and force every single worker into private arbitration. One by one, alone, against an army of corporate lawyers. They'd never win. Grace watched my face. Now do you see? I nodded. Your brother is smart, she continued. This clause is technically legal, but it's also exactly the kind of thing a judge needs to understand before approving the acquisition. Especially a judge who cares about workers' rights. The judge in this case, Judge Patricia Hendricks, 20 years on the bench, former labor attorney. She's fair, but she doesn't tolerate corporations steamrolling vulnerable workers. What do you need from me? Grace folded her hands. I need you to testify. My heart stopped. What? As a character witness, someone who knows Derek personally, someone who can speak to his pattern of behavior, his attitude toward workers, his priorities. He's my brother. I know. My family will never forgive me. I know that too. I stared at the folder. Grace spoke gently. Maya, I'm not going to pressure you. This is your choice. But those 72 people, they don't have the luxury of choice. They showed up every day, worked hard, trusted their employer, and they got robbed. I thought about the single mother, the man with the injured back, the woman who'd been misclassified for 3 years. I thought about Derek's Rolex, his custom suits, his $40 million deal. I thought about who I wanted to be. Okay, I said, I'll do it. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Derek. I just showed up at the courthouse that Tuesday morning, 2 hours before the hearing was scheduled to start. Grace met me in the hallway. You ready? No, I wasn't ready. My hands were shaking, my stomach was in knots. But I nodded. Remember, Grace said, just tell the truth. Answer the questions, don't let them rattle you. Derek's legal team would cross-examine me, I knew that. Grace had prepared me, but preparation and reality are different things. Especially when it's your own brother on the other side. At 9:30, my parents arrived. My mom saw me first. Her face lit up. Maya, I didn't think you were coming. She pulled me into a hug. My dad kissed my forehead. Good to see you, sweetheart. They had no idea. I felt sick. At 9:45, Derek walked in. He was surrounded by lawyers, 4 of them, all expensive suits and leather briefcases. He was talking, gesturing, completely in his element. Then he saw me. For a second, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. He broke away from his lawyers and walked over. You came. I did. He smiled, actually smiled, like maybe we were okay, like maybe he hadn't called me a nobody. I'm glad, he said. It means a lot. To me, to Mom and Dad. I couldn't meet his eyes. Derek, All rise. The bailiff's voice cut through the lobby. The hearing was starting. Derek straightened his tie. Come on, let's go. He walked toward the courtroom doors. I stood frozen. Grace appeared beside me. It's time. I followed her in. Judge Patricia Hendricks was exactly what I'd imagined. Mid-60s, steel gray hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked like someone who did not suffer fools. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood-paneled, rows of benches. Derek and his lawyers sat at one table. Grace and her team sat at another. And in the gallery, scattered across the benches, were the workers. 72 people who'd been brave enough to fight back. I saw the single mother, the man with the injured back, the woman who'd been misclassified. They looked tired, worn down, but they were there. My parents sat in the front row, confused about why I wasn't sitting with them. Derek kept glancing back at me. He still didn't understand. Judge Hendricks banged her gavel. This hearing will come to order. We're here to review the proposed acquisition of Midland Manufacturing by Chen Capital Partners, and to address pending litigation filed by former Midland employees. She looked down at her notes. I've reviewed the filings. I've read the employment transition clause, and I have questions. Derek's lead lawyer stood. His name was Marcus something, late 50s, silver hair, the kind of lawyer who charged $1,000 an hour. Your Honor, if I may. You may not, Judge Hendricks interrupted. I'll hear from the plaintiffs first. Ms. Okoye? Grace stood. Your Honor, we're asking the court to block this acquisition unless Mr. Chen agrees to remove the mandatory arbitration clause and allow the class action suit to proceed. On what grounds? On the grounds that this clause is a deliberate attempt to deny these workers their day in court. They have a right to collective action. Mr. Chen is trying to strip that right away. Marcus stood again. Your Honor, this is a standard employment transition clause. It's used in acquisitions across. I know what it is, Counselor, Judge Hendricks said dryly. What I want to know is why Mr. Chen feels it's necessary. All eyes turned to Derek. He stood, confident, smooth. Your Honor, I'm not trying to deny anyone anything. I'm trying to build a viable business. The arbitration clause protects both the company and the employees. It provides a faster, more efficient resolution process. Faster for whom? Judge Hendricks asked. For everyone, Your Honor. Mr. Chen, are you aware that of the last 100 employment arbitration cases filed in this state, employees won exactly 6 times? Derek hesitated. I'm not familiar with those statistics, Your Honor. Well, I am, because I used to represent workers in arbitration. And I can tell you that mandatory arbitration is rarely efficient for anyone except the corporation. Grace spoke up. Your Honor, we'd like to call a witness. Someone who can speak to Mr. Chen's character and business practices. Judge Hendricks looked interested. Proceed. Grace turned, made eye contact with me. We call Maya Chen. The courtroom went silent. My mother gasped. My father said, What? Derek's head snapped around. His face went white, then red. Your Honor, Marcus started. Is this witness related to the defendant? Judge Hendricks asked. She's his sister, Grace said calmly. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. But not illegal, Judge Hendricks said. I'll allow it. Ms. Chen, please approach. I stood. My legs felt like water. As I walked toward the witness stand, I passed Derek's table. He grabbed my arm. Maya, he hissed, what the hell are you doing? I looked at him, really looked at him, and I barely recognized the person staring back. The right thing, I said quietly. I pulled away and took the stand. The bailiff swore me in. Grace approached. She looked calm, professional. Ms. Chen, please state your relationship to Derek Chen. He's my brother. And what do you do for a living? I'm a youth advocate. I work with kids aging out of foster care. Does your work involve employment issues? Often, yes. Helping young people understand their rights as workers. Making sure they're not exploited. Objection, Marcus said. Relevance? I'm establishing the witness's expertise in recognizing labor exploitation, Grace said. Your Honor, this goes to character. Overruled. Continue. Grace turned back to me. Maya, when did you first become aware of this acquisition? I told her about the phone call. Derek's request that I show up. His dismissal of the wage theft allegations. What did he say specifically? Grace asked. He said the workers were lying, that they were just trying to get money they didn't earn. Did he express any concern for whether the allegations might be true? No. He said even if they were true, it wasn't his problem. That he was buying assets, not responsibility. In the gallery, the workers leaned forward. My mother was crying. Derek sat rigid, his jaw clenched. Grace continued. Maya, in the time you've known your brother, his entire life, have you observed a pattern in how he treats people he considers beneath him economically? Objection! Marcus shot to his feet. This is character assassination. Your Honor, Mr. Chen's attitude toward workers is directly relevant to whether this court should trust his promises about treating these employees fairly. Judge Hendricks considered. I'll allow it, but be specific, Ms. Okoye. Grace nodded. Maya, can you give an example? I took a breath. Last Thanksgiving, we were at my parents' house. Derek was talking about his company. He said, I had to steady my voice. He said that if workers wanted to make more money, they should have worked harder in school. That poverty was a choice. That people who complained about wages were just lazy. Did anyone challenge him on that? I did. I told him about the families I work with. Kids who grew up in horrific circumstances, who didn't have the opportunities he had. He laughed at me, said I was naive, that I was wasting my life on people who would never amount to anything. The courtroom was silent. Grace let that sit for a moment. Maya, why are you here today? I looked at the workers, then at Derek, then at Judge Hendricks. Because I've spent my entire career fighting for people who don't have power. People who are told they don't matter. And I can't stand by and watch my brother crush 72 people just to make himself richer. Objection, Marcus was nearly shouting. This is inflammatory. Overruled, Judge Hendricks said quietly. She was looking at me now, really looking. Grace stepped back. No further questions. Marcus approached. His smile was sharp. Ms. Chen, you testified that you work in youth advocacy. What's your annual salary? Objection, Grace said. Relevance? Your Honor, this goes to potential bias. The witness may harbor resentment toward her successful brother. Judge. Hendricks frowned but nodded. Answer the question. 37,000, I said. And your brother makes? I don't know exactly. Millions. Your brother makes millions. Does that bother you? No. Really, because your testimony suggests a lot of anger toward him. I'm not angry that he's successful. I'm angry that he doesn't care who he hurts to stay successful. Marcus smirked. You're not a business expert, are you? No. You've never run a company? No. Never managed employees? Not in that sense. So your opinion on whether this acquisition is fair is based on, what, feelings? I met his eyes. It's based on knowing right from wrong. How convenient. And did you ever consider that by testifying here today, you might be sabotaging your own brother's deal, costing him millions? Yes. And you did it anyway? Yes. Why? I looked at the workers again. The single mother was watching me with tears in her eyes. Because their lives matter more than his profits. Marcus had no response to that. He sat down. I'd like to call Derek Chen to the stand, Grace said. Derek stood. He looked calm, but I knew him well enough to see the fury underneath. He was sworn in. Grace didn't waste time. Mr. Chen, you told your sister that the wage theft allegations against Midland were overblown. Is that correct? That's correct. Have you personally reviewed the workers' testimony? My lawyers have. That's not what I asked. Derek shifted. I've been briefed. So you haven't read the actual testimony? I've read summaries. Mr. Chen, are you aware that Midland's CEO is currently under criminal investigation for tax fraud? His eyes flickered. I'd heard rumors. Rumors. Did you conduct any due diligence on the company's ethical practices before trying to acquire it? We conducted standard financial due diligence. That's not what I asked. I assessed the business's profitability. That's my job. Is it also your job to ensure you're not buying a company built on stolen wages? Objection, Marcus stood. Assumes facts not in evidence. Sustained, Judge Hendricks said, but she was watching Derek carefully. Grace continued, Mr. Chen, if this court blocks your acquisition, what happens to your business? I lose a significant opportunity, but there are other deals. So you'll be fine? Objection, relevance. I'm establishing stakes, Your Honor. Overruled, Derek answered through gritted teeth. Yes, I'll be fine. And if this court allows the acquisition to proceed with the arbitration clause, what happens to these 72 workers? They'll have their cases heard. In mandatory arbitration, one by one, against your lawyers, with a 6% historical success rate. Derek said nothing. Mr. Chen, do you believe you have a responsibility to these workers? I believe I have a responsibility to run a profitable business. That's not what I asked. He met her eyes. No, I don't believe I'm responsible for what Midland did before I bought it. Even if you profit from what they did. That's how business works. Grace paused. Let that statement hang in the air. Then she turned to Judge Hendricks. No further questions. Judge Hendricks called a recess. I stepped out into the hallway, my whole body shaking. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. But the weight of it was crushing. I was leaning against the wall, trying to breathe, when Derek found me. He walked up slowly. His lawyers hung back, giving us space. Maya. I looked up. His face was a mask of controlled rage. You just destroyed me in there. I told the truth. You betrayed me. Derek. Do you have any idea what you've done? Judge Hendricks is going to block this deal. I can see it on her face. And it's because my own sister got up on that stand and painted me as some kind of monster. You're not a monster, I said quietly. You're just so focused on winning that you forgot people aren't obstacles. They're people. He laughed bitterly. People, right. Like those workers in there who are trying to squeeze money out of a company I don't even own yet. They're trying to get what they earned. They're trying to get more than they earned. That's the game, Maya. They sue. Companies settle. Everyone moves on. Except the workers who got robbed. Jesus Christ. Derek ran his hands through his hair. You really believe you're the hero here, don't you? You think you're fighting for justice? I'm fighting for what's right. You're fighting to make yourself feel important. His voice rose. You've spent your whole life in my shadow, and this is your chance to be the star. To matter. To be something other than the sister who couldn't cut it in the real world. The words hit like a slap. That's what you think, I asked. That I did this for attention? What else would it be? You don't care about those workers. You don't even know them. I know they deserve better than being crushed by people like you. People like me. He stepped closer. I came from the same place you did, Maya. Same town, same parents, same opportunities. The difference is I actually did something with my life. You mean you made money? I mean I succeeded. He was shouting now. People in the hallway were staring. I built something. I created jobs. I contribute to the economy. What do? You hand out bus passes and tell yourself you're making a difference. I felt tears burning. I do make a difference. To who? To kids who'll end up in the same poverty cycle you're trying to save them from. You're delusional, Maya. You're playing make-believe while the real world passes you by. The real world, I said slowly, is 72 people in that courtroom who just want to be paid for their work. The real world is competition, winner and losers. And you've always been a loser. There it was. The truth. He'd been dancing around for years. You're right, I said softly. I am a loser. By your definition. I don't have money. I don't have status. I don't have a Rolex or a penthouse or a company worth millions. I looked him in the eye. But I can sleep at night. He stared at me. We're done, he said finally. After today, you're not my sister anymore. You're nothing to me. He turned and walked away. I slid down the wall and cried. When we returned to the courtroom, the energy had shifted. Judge Hendricks looked like she'd made up her mind. Derek sat at his table, staring straight ahead. He wouldn't look at me. My parents sat in the gallery, looking lost. They still didn't understand what had happened. The workers sat together, holding hands. Judge Hendricks cleared her throat. I've heard testimony from both sides. I've reviewed the filings. And I've given considerable thought to the arguments presented. The room held its breath. Mr. Chen, I appreciate your business acumen. I appreciate your success, but this court does not exist to rubber stamp deals that trample on workers' rights. Derek's jaw tightened. The mandatory arbitration clause in your acquisition proposal is legal, but it is also transparently designed to avoid accountability. These workers filed a class action lawsuit in good faith. They deserve to have that case heard. Grace squeezed my hand. Therefore, I am blocking this acquisition unless Mr. Chen agrees to remove the arbitration clause and allow the lawsuit to proceed in open court. Derek shot to his feet. Your Honor. Furthermore, Judge Hendricks continued, I am referring this matter to the State Labor Board for investigation. If Midland Manufacturing has engaged in systematic wage theft, there need to be consequences beyond a civil settlement. Marcus stood. Your Honor, with respect, this is overreach. It's my courtroom, Counselor. I'll decide what constitutes overreach. Judge Hendricks turned her attention to the workers. To the plaintiffs in this case, I know this process has been long and difficult. I know you've been made to feel small, insignificant, like your fight doesn't matter. But it does. Your fight matters, and this court sees you. The single mother started crying. Judge Hendricks banged her gavel. We're adjourned. As people stood to leave, something unexpected happened. Judge Hendricks stepped down from the bench. She walked past Derek's table. She walked past Grace's table. And she walked straight to me. I was still sitting, stunned, trying to process what had just happened. Judge Hendricks extended her hand. Ms. Chen, she said quietly, I've been on this bench for 20 years, and I have rarely seen someone show the kind of courage you showed today. I stood shakily and took her hand. What you did wasn't easy, she continued. Standing up to family never is. But those workers needed someone to speak truth to power, and you did. She shook my hand firmly. Then she did something that made the entire courtroom stop and stare. She pulled me into a hug. Thank you, she whispered, for reminding me why I became a judge. When she pulled back, there were tears in her eyes. She turned to the workers. And thank you for having the courage to fight. Justice takes time, but it's coming. She nodded to Grace, to the workers, and walked out. The courtroom erupted. The workers surrounded me, thanking me, hugging me, crying. The single mother grabbed my hands. You saved us, she said in broken English. You saved us. No, I said, you saved yourselves. You filed the lawsuit, you stood up. I just told the truth. But she shook her head. You risked everything, for us, people you don't even know. Behind them, I saw Derek. He was standing alone at his table. His lawyers had stepped away to confer. My parents were trying to approach him, but he waved them off. He looked at me across the courtroom. And for just a second, I saw something other than anger. I saw loss. I didn't hear from Derek. My parents called me a dozen times, asking me to explain, to help them understand. I tried. I told them about the workers, the wage theft, the arbitration clause. My mom cried. But he's your brother, Maya. How could you do that to your brother? How could he do that to those workers? I asked. She didn't have an answer. Derek withdrew his acquisition bid. Grace told me that Midland's CEO ended up facing criminal charges. The company went into bankruptcy, but the workers' lawsuit continued, and they eventually won a settlement of $14 million. Divided among 72 people, it wasn't life-changing money, but it was justice. I went back to work. Same nonprofit, same studio apartment, same 2009 car. But something had changed. I started getting calls. Other workers who'd heard about the case. Other people facing exploitation. They wanted help. They wanted guidance. They wanted someone to believe them. Grace and I started working together, pro bono on my end, consulting on labor cases, helping workers understand their rights. It wasn't glamorous, it didn't pay well, but it mattered. I was at my apartment on a Saturday morning when someone knocked on my door. I opened it. Derek stood there. He looked different, tired. His clothes were still expensive, but less flashy. No Rolex. "Hi," he said. "Hi." We stood there awkwardly. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He looked around my studio, the thrift store furniture, the posters on the walls, the tiny kitchen. "You want coffee?" I asked. "Sure." I made coffee. We sat at my little table. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, I lost the company. I looked up, startled. "What?" Chen Capital Partners. My investors pulled out after the Midland thing went public. Said I was a liability. I had to dissolve. "Derek, I'm not here for sympathy," he said quickly. "I'm just explaining." He took a sip of coffee. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. In the courthouse. About sleeping at night." I waited. "I haven't slept well in 6 months," he admitted. "I keep thinking about those workers, about what you said on the stand, about who I became." His voice cracked. "I don't know when I turned into that person, Maya. The person who could look at someone's pain and just not care. As long as I was winning." "Derek." "Let me finish." He took a breath. "You were right. About all of it. I did forget that people aren't obstacles. I did stop seeing human beings and start seeing assets. Opportunities. Numbers on a spreadsheet." He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "I called you a nobody, my own sister. The person who's been fighting for people her whole life. And I called you a nobody. You were angry. I was wrong." He wiped his eyes. "You're not a nobody, Maya. You're the person I should have been, the person I used to be." I reached across the table and took his hand. "You can still be that person." "I don't know how." "Start small," I said. "Start with saying you're sorry." He nodded. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." We sat there holding hands, crying together. "What are you going to do now?" I asked. "I don't know. I've been talking to some people in the nonprofit sector, using my business skills for something that actually helps people. It's a pay cut." He laughed wetly. "A huge pay cut. But maybe that's the point." "Maybe." He squeezed my hand. "I missed you." "I missed you too." We talked for hours, about childhood, about our parents, about the people we'd been and the people we wanted to become. When he left, he hugged me tight. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not giving up on me." "You're my brother," I said. "I'll never give up on you." The reunion was at a community center in Detroit. Grace had organized it. All 72 workers who'd been part of the lawsuit. Their families, their lawyers. A celebration of the settlement, but also of the fight. I almost didn't go. I didn't feel like I deserved to be celebrated. I just told the truth. But Grace insisted. When I walked in, the room erupted in applause. The workers surrounded me, thanking me, hugging me, showing me photos of their kids, their new homes, their lives rebuilt. The single mother, her name was Faduma, pulled me aside. "My daughter starts college next month," she said, beaming. "First in our family, because of the settlement, because of you." "Because of you," I corrected. "You were brave enough to fight." "We fight together," she said simply. Later, Grace stood up to speak. She talked about the case, the struggle, the victory. And then she said, "But I want to recognize someone special. Someone who risked everything to stand up for people she'd never met. Maya Chen." Everyone turned to look at me. "Maya could have stayed silent," Grace continued. "She could have supported her brother and made her life easier, but she chose to speak truth. And that changed everything." She raised her glass. "To Maya, for showing us what courage looks like." "To Maya!" the room shouted. I stood there, overwhelmed, as 72 people and their families cheered for me. And in that moment, I understood something. Derek had called me a nobody. And by the world's standards, the standards of money and status and power, maybe I was. I didn't have a mansion. I didn't have a sports car. I didn't have a company worth millions. But I had something better. I had the respect of people who'd been knocked down and gotten back up. I had the gratitude of families who'd fought for justice and won. I had the knowledge that when I was tested, when I had to choose between family loyalty and doing right, I chose right. That's not nothing. That's everything. That night, I got a text from Derek. "Saw the photos from the celebration. Proud of you, always have been. Just forgot how to show it." I smiled and texted back. "You can still learn." "I'm trying. New job starts Monday. Community Development Director for a housing nonprofit. Half my old salary, twice the meaning." "That's huge. Congrats." "Thanks. Hey, can we have dinner soon? I want to tell you about it. About everything." "I'd like that. Love you, Maya." I stared at those words. 3 words he hadn't said in years. "Love you too, Derek." I put my phone down and looked out my apartment window. The city lights twinkled in the distance. Somewhere out there, 72 families were sleeping a little easier, breathing a little lighter, because someone had stood up for them. And yeah, that someone was me. The nobody. The girl with the thrift store suit and the 2009 car and the studio apartment. The girl who'd looked a judge in the eye and told the truth. I thought about Judge Hendricks, standing up and shaking my hand. I thought about Faduma's daughter, heading to college. I thought about Derek, learning to be human again. And I realized something. My brother had been wrong about a lot of things. But he'd been wrong about one thing most of all. Nobody? No. I was somebody. I always had been.